Hello, M&A Advisor community. Welcome to the M&A Advisor podcast. I'm Roger Aguinaldo, creator and CEO of the M&A Advisor. Join me as I talk to the best of the best in M&A, distressed investing, restructuring, and the financing industry. Buckle up and stay tuned until the end because you will be listening to an awesome conversation. These days, the M&A Advisor is gearing up for the 2024 Leadership in Dealmaking Summit. In this regard, we recently announced the Leadership Awards recipient, Paul Aversano, Managing Director of Alvarez Marsal. Hey, Paul, how are you?
Hi, Roger. Thanks for having me.
Well, great. Just for those folks who don't know, the Leadership Award is a prestigious recognition designed for exemplary deal makers whose contributions significantly advance their companies and the M&A industry. This award celebrates individuals whose leadership not only drives their company's success, but also propels the industry forward. Recognizing Paul as the 2024 Leadership Awards recipient is truly apropos, as he is a global dealmaker extraordinaire. Just to give you a little bit about his background, he's the global practice leader of A&M's Global Transaction Advisory Group and has oversight of A&M's Corporate Transactions Group. For over 25 years, he has led both buy-side and sell-side financial and accounting due diligence projects for complex public and private company transactions and in the capital markets. Paul works to deliver the firm's services to clients in North America, Europe, the Middle East, India, Asia, and Latin America, a truly global footprint. He leads A&M's efforts in the cross-border delivery of services to private equity firms, sovereign wealth funds, and family offices, as well as to corporate and strategic buyers around the world across a wide spectrum of industries. Paul earned a bachelor's degree in accounting from Binghamton University. He's a CPA, and he serves on the board of directors of New York Police and Firefighters Widows and Children's Benefit Fund, Answer the Call, and Power Play NYC. Paul, all our listeners are aspiring deal makers, and I'm sure that they are dreaming of getting to where you are right now. And in this conversation today, I'm hoping you can give them a glimpse of your beginnings and deal-making adventures. So, welcome. And I just want to start there. I think humble beginnings. Did you grow up in New York? Where did you grow up? And then your decision to go to SUNY Binghamton, which is the largest state university, for those of you who don't know, one of the larger state University of New York universities, very, very big and regarded of the state public universities, if you will. And it's a good bargain. I sent a couple of my kids to SUNY instead of some of these Ivy League, although my kids weren't totally Ivy League, but very good bargain, if you will, nowadays.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
for sure.
So where did you grow up? And
yes, I grew up in New York. I'm actually the first person in my family to go to college.
Oh, really?
So with my background and where I, education and all that, it's definitely non-traditional getting to work in the industry that we're in. I ended up going to what is now Binghamton University. So we're classing the joint up a little bit. I landed up, mostly because I probably could have went to almost, any school, but I graduated in the top 10 students in high school, but a lot of it was just lack of.
Where did you go to high school? Where did you go?
Grew up mostly on Long Island in Hicksville. So I went to Hicks High School. I'm completely public school educated from high school to college. And I think I was, 8 or 9 in the class out of over 400. But I only applied to the state schools largely because of financial resources.
Yeah.
Binghamton was the best of the state schools, and I got right into the school of management. I know I wanted business. I started off as a finance major, but in the late 80s, early 90s, nobody was hiring a finance major.
Right.
Goldman Sachs wasn't coming up to SUNY Binghamton in those days and hiring finance majors. So
they were hiring at all the Ivy Leagues.
Exactly.
Ivy Leagues, and now at your position, I'm sure you're hiring all the Ivy Leagues. But you probably go to. I mean, I know this is a little off the journey over there, but do you? Because of where you're at, I mean, are you hiring from some of these other institutions instead of the?
No, we generally, Other parts of A&M, we do have an Ivy League focus. In our group, for the transactions world, we're not going after the Ivy Leagues. I mean, what we really care about, we want obviously the students to have, off campus, we want folks to have the horsepower to do the work,
Yeah.
right? And if you look at a school like Binghamton today, I probably wouldn't get in there. The level of it's been ranked one of the top 10 public universities in the United States. It's, kind of one of the new Ivy Leagues up there with Michigan and a lot of these other schools. And the School of Management is very strong. But we like students ultimately, obviously have the horsepower to do the work. But what we really care about are positive attitude, willingness to learn. And we want people who are gritty, right? We want gritty. At A&M, we really don't care what your background is, where you came from. We care about performance, right? And we're a meritocracy. If you are performing in our firm, you'll be recognized and rewarded for that. And, I kind of fit that model. I always view myself as sort of a blue collar person in a white collar job, right?
Yeah.
I grew up, like I said, as the first in my family to go to college, let alone be a professional. I've been very fortunate. I had a great upbringing with two very strong parents who were focused on education and discipline.
Yep.
And I think that's the foundation to launch. When I went to Binghamton, like I said, I knew I wanted school management. It was cost effective. I got right in. I wasn't messing around. And when I was there, I saw that the accounting firms, the big four, big six at the time, they were the ones who were doing a lot of the hiring at the school. And I said, I'm not necessarily in love with accounting, but I wanted a job. And I landed up junior year. Sophomore year, I switched from finance to accounting. Junior year, I interned at Arthur Andersen.
Yep.
Got a job offer at the end of my junior year. Went back senior year with a job offer, finished, got my bachelor's of science in accounting, studied and passed the CPA exam, and started work at Arthur Andersen at that point in time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's kind of how I got into the accounting world. And I say it's great to have that accounting CPA foundation. There's not too many CPAs out of work. There's actually a shortage of CPAs in the United States today. And I said, let me figure out my move from there. I can go to law school. I can go get an MBA and all that stuff. But then my career, what I do now for a living, I didn't even know existed
Right.
when I was in college.
Well, I don't think I went to NYU for my MBA and, I took one, maybe two mergers and acquisitions courses. There's no
I don't
M&A
even think
track,
I took
right?
one. I took the closest I took was advanced accounting, where we
Right.
talked a little bit about M&A, but it wasn't really it. But it's interesting because what we do now is it's got a foundation in accounting, but it's actually more finance probably than accounting.
Right.
Um,
Right.
but
So
we need
you're
we
at
need an
Arthur
accounting.
Andersen. You're at Arthur Andersen now. So your path to M&A, how'd that get?
So when I started at Arthur Andersen, there was only two paths you go: audit or tax. I knew I didn't want tax, so I went into audit. And I started my career as a young associate in the early 90s at Arthur Andersen in New York City. And I was in the audit practice that did commercial products and services clients. So industrial, manufacturing, distribution. I enjoyed learning how businesses operated and then how that translated into a set of financial statements. I probably got on the coolest audit that you could work on. I used to actually audit as a young staff person, the National Football League
Yep.
and the
Yeah.
Super Bowl.
Yeah. And
So I never got
they were
that.
headquartered in New York, right? They're
Yeah, on Park Avenue. Yeah.
Yeah.
So as a young staff person, because I was an intern, returning intern, and there weren't many of us, I was able to get, some of the more premium audits.
Yeah.
So,
Did you get tickets? Did you get?
no, the partners got the tickets,
Oh,
and
okay.
they would bring me back a hat from the
Okay.
airport for the Super
Well,
Bowl.
you got that.
That was about it. But it was fun, and it was interesting work, auditing all that. And then, in those days, there wasn't much private equity activity. And when private equity started to come on the scene, diligence assignments started to come into the firm, and they didn't know what to do with it. And what we landed up doing is whatever industry the target was in,
Yep.
they would give it to that audit practice.
Right.
So a lot of the deals in the early and mid 90s were brick and mortar transactions. So commercial products, we had that industry expertise, right?
Right.
So, and they only used to let the partners do that level of work because it was new. They viewed it as high risk and not, like you said, they don't teach it in school. It's very much an apprenticeship model. So I would be out in the staff room as like a second year associate. And I used to see a group of partners kind of running around, kind of operating differently internally.
Hmm.
And I was like, what are those folks doing? And they're like, oh, they're doing deals. I'm like, deals? I'm like, I don't know what that is, but I want in, right? So I literally went to one of the partners who I didn't really know very well. And I knocked on the door and I said, listen, you don't know me. I'm a second year associate out here. I heard you guys are working on deals. I don't know if you need any help, but I'd love to help out. And he was like, yeah, kid, all right, whatever, get out of here. But what happened was in those days, everything wasn't electronic, computerized.
Right.
So they literally had, I carried the bags, and there were literally bags of files and binders to carry in those days. And I used to do all the faxing and photocopying, that had to get done.
Yeah.
So I remember I'd be staying late at night, by the fax machine, feeding pages in. All the staff are going to happy hours, and they're like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Well, I'm helping these guys out. I want to do deals, right?" So
And
for like a year,
for those listeners, and I know there was an email. There was
there
no
was an email back then.
was an email, and the fax machine was this device there. You kind of put
The
things.
fax and copy management was like a big part of my job as an associate. That and ordering food. I used to keep one of the partners' credit cards in my wallet, and I would order breakfast, lunch, and dinner for the deal teams all the time.
Well, they
So
need
anyway,
somebody to do a lot of that grunt work. Now you have Grubhub and all these apps. You could just
oh, it's so much easier. I used to start in the morning. I'd get in at 6 a.m. and I used to call all the local delis, and they would fax me their menus for the day. I'd have to go around and take everybody's order. And then by the time I got breakfast in, then it was lunchtime. And then I did it for dinner. Like the whole day was just meal management in those days.
Hey, that's a good groundwork for project management, making
Yeah.
expectations. If they didn't have the ham and cheese, you had to break the bad news to some partners,
Well,
right?
let me tell you something. I used to get coffee. Like partners would just look at me and whistle and kind of go like this, and I'd go get them a coffee. I couldn't imagine asking someone to do that today.
Right.
But in those days, that's just what you did. I had my head down, and I was just happy I had a job at a good firm. So, I wanted to do deals, and I literally carried the bags for a year or two. But I was in the meetings, and I was the only staff person in the meetings with these partners and management teams. And I was learning by just osmosis, apprentice. And then what happened is mid-90s, Arthur Anderson decided, hey, you know what? Maybe this M&A thing is a real business.
Yeah.
And I remember they took 10 people out of the audit practice and 10 people out of the tax practice, and they put them together only in New York. And they created, it wasn't even called transaction advisory or deals in those days.
Right.
It wasn't even called private equity. It was called financial buyers. And we created the FBI, the Financial Buyers Initiative. And as those people spun out to create what later became transaction advisory and all that, on the way out the door, they just took partners. They said, hey, and that guy Aversano, that guy, he's with us. I was like, really?
Yeah.
So it was me
They
as the
needed
only
somebody to order
Yeah.
the lunch. I mean,
Exactly.
come on, Paul.
So I kind of paid dues for about 2 years.
Yeah.
But then I got to go in that group as like the only young staff person.
Well,
in
this
New
is
York.
this is a. I want to pause right there because this is. I think there's a lesson there. Two things. One, you sought out a mentor.
I
It's not
proactively sought it
you
out. Yes.
proactively sought out a mentor. You ordered their lunch, so anybody who orders my lunch for me, I'm gonna like, right? So you got them to like you, right?
But I didn't have much of a choice, but I did it, and I did it with a smile.
Hey, deal makers and industry leaders, are you ready to make deal connections, meet like-minded deal makers, and celebrate with the best in the mergers and acquisitions industry? I'm Roger Aguinaldo, creator and CEO of the M&A Advisor, and I invite you to mark your calendars for the 2024 Leadership in Deal-Making Summit. This event will feature the prestigious awards gala for the 15th Annual Emerging Leaders Awards and the 15th Annual International M&A Awards on September 23rd and 24th, 2024 at the iconic New York Athletic Club in the heart of New York City. This is your chance to meet with the trailblazers who are shaping the future of global mergers and acquisitions. And this event is a gift that keeps on giving. We are thrilled to honor Paul Aversano, the managing director at Alvarez and Marsal, with the 2024 Leadership Award. Paul's dedication and expertise have set a new standard in our industry, and we can't wait to celebrate his achievements. And the excitement doesn't stop there. Former U.S. Secretary of Commerce, Wilbur Ross, will be a co-chair of the event and an esteemed featured guest speaker. Be here when we dive deep into the latest trends, strategies, and innovations with Wilbur Ross and the top experts from around the globe. Whether you're a seasoned professional or just starting your journey in mergers and acquisitions, This summit will change your life and the trajectory of your career. So don't miss out on this incredible opportunity to elevate your game and expand your network. Visit www.maadvisor.com. It's MAADVISOR.com today to register and secure your spot at the 2024 Leadership in Dealmaking Summit. See you in New York on September 23rd and 24th. The Leadership of Dealmaking awaits. Right. Now after COVID, right, there's a there in, and I'm not saying that happens at your firm, but there's this sense that of entitlement for the younger generation.
Oh yeah.
Right. And maybe not at A&M, maybe, but it's a cultural thing, and paying your dues, people don't want to do that anymore.
Yeah. Well, I think part of it also, we haven't really been in recent times through a recessionary environment. Like when I joined the workforce,
Right.
it was a recessionary environment. I was just happy to have a job.
You were
right?
right after, I guess that was right after the stock market crash in 87, right? And then
Yeah.
and then for a few years there was a savings and loan debacle.
Yep.
You know,
Long-term capital management, and we're dating ourselves.
Yeah.
But then I rode the M&A wave up until, Y2K.
Right.
And then the dot-com bubble and all that.
Yep.
And then, but at that point,
talk about, look, before you talk about, I wanted to capture this, mentorship, seeking out a mentor, working with a mentor, and that, and then also, maybe what is today's paying your dues? What is that going to look like?
I would say it this way. It's human nature. People want to work with people that want to work with them, right? It's human nature. So when I went in, I didn't realize it at the time, but if you look back, when I went into that partner's office and knocked on his door and said, "Hey, I want to help you, and I'll do the shit work that needs to get done," right?
Right.
If he needs something, who's he going to go to? The person that he knows wants to work with him or her, or the 50 other staff people sitting out there who showed no interest in this whatsoever, right? The natural inclination is people want to work with people that want to work with them.
Yeah.
And that goes for anything. Like I'm happy to teach people and train them if they want to learn.
Right.
They come to me, "Can you show me how to do this?" Most people like to do that.
Yeah.
But only with people who want to learn.
Yeah.
If you don't have that, that's why I go back to what I said at the beginning. If you go back and look at positive attitude and willingness to learn, that will get you very far in your career. So I had that. I wasn't rolling my eyes when I had to order breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day. I wasn't rolling my eyes when I had to stay late to feed the paper when it got jammed into the fax machine, right?
Yeah.
I did what it took, and then it benefited me because I got to go.
Right.
And then as that group started to take off, everybody wanted in,
Right.
but I was already there.
Yeah, you were right there.
So it kind of, it worked out. Now, I didn't realize that at the time. I just had that blue collar, mentality, right? I mean, I used to own my own landscaping business in high school. I used to valet park cars. I used to sell sneakers at a sporting goods store. I delivered newspapers. So to me,
you were
being
already,
in an office,
you were already entrepreneurial. You were,
I had
doing
that
all this stuff, right?
right. So, that's how I kind of got into it. And then, fortunately for me, obviously private equity in the M&A market has grown exponentially over the last 25 years. And I've been there almost since the beginning of it, since the advent of it. So I've been fortunate, but it started with being proactive, positive attitude, and a willingness to learn. Because doing the deals, like you said, there's no class that's going to teach you how to do this type of work. It's very much apprenticeship. And I was willing to learn, and I was in the room in all those meetings, taking notes, listening, learning. And then they started giving me responsibilities. And then I started executing on that.
Right.
And that's how I got into, what is now transaction advisory.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. So now you're at Anderson. Thank you for that. That's very, very enlightening. Good lessons there for folks hearing this. You're in transaction advisory at Anderson. Now, how did you, what was the path now to get to Alvarez and Marsal? And Alvarez wasn't Alvarez and Marsal when you joined, I'm sure, right?
Yeah. Well, so I was at Anderson and I thought I would spend my whole career there. I was there almost 10 years. I was there to the very end when it collapsed under Enron.
Okay.
So at that point, I needed to make a move, and I landed up going with my team to EY. So I went to EY, where I spent 4 years. I was a partner at EY, all in New York City. My whole career has been in New York. And I was in charge from EY's New York middle market private equity, go to market. So the
Right.
way EY looked at it in those days, there were three kind of go to market channels. There was mega fund PE. Anything that wasn't mega fund was considered middle market, and that's where I played. And then they had a corporate M&A channel. There was kind of three big channels given how big the New York market was.
Yep.
So I went with my Anderson team to EY.
And that was
And,
early 2000s, right?
early 2000s. Yeah, I was at EY from 2002. I was literally at Anderson until the very end. Like I waited online and I handed in my laptop and my Diners Club card and
Okay.
walked down the street, and there was a big sign at EY, welcome former Anderson employees. And we registered and kind of went upstairs, and I just continued working. It was like one morning I was an Anderson employee. The afternoon I was an EY guy.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was that's a whole nother podcast.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm sure there are books written about it, but, travesty, I think, what happened to Anderson it
I
was
think
a
we all agree. Yeah.
great brand name and, a few folks down in Texas,
Yeah. Right. Right. But, I actually, it worked out, again, when you look back, you can't control necessarily, and you don't realize the opportunities that happen necessarily at the time.
Right.
But when I look back on it, I personally think I'm a way better professional and certainly better off in my career, given what happened at Anderson. I mean, I was forced into this situation through no, part of my own, but having to exit Anderson and then integrate into another big four firm at a fairly senior level, that's not easy. Right. And I had to go through a lot, and you get kind of toughened up and battled going through all that.
That's kind of weird that happened. Just that, I'm reminded that, you and I probably understand what Enron and what happened to Anderson, but Enron was this sort of, financial fraud, right? Maybe
Yeah.
you could explain in 30 seconds what Enron was and why Anderson,
Well,
kind of went away.
Enron was a financial fraud. Anderson were the auditors. And where Anderson got in trouble was there was allegations, and again, I don't remember all the facts, but there was document destruction, evidently or allegedly, at Arthur Anderson once the fraud of Enron happened, because I guess the folks at Anderson who were involved were trying to cover their tracks. So what the death blow for Anderson was, the firm was indicted by the Justice Department or whoever it is. And once that happens, obviously clients flee, and it's like a run on the bank. The ironic thing is that the indictment was overturned, and Anderson was
Years and years later.
exonerated. It wasn't that. It was like a year or two later. But at that point, it was too late.
Yeah.
Right. It was over. So, but you learn a lot about managing risk and, putting all your eggs in one basket. And, I never thought I would work anywhere than Arthur Anderson, and I had no choice but to find a new job. And then, it caused you to think differently. So when I'm at EY, I'm at a different place. And at that point, when I left EY, I had about 15 years of Big Four experience, but I never thought I'd work outside of the Big Four. That's kind of the world that I knew.
Yep.
And then I was approached by the folks at A&M. Now, A&M's role, they were actually the restructuring firm for Enron.
Okay.
So there's a lot of connectivity between ex-Anderson folks who joined A&M post Enron. So when the firm, at that point, A&M was a boutique restructuring firm. This is like 2005, 2006. And Brian Marsal, who's our co-founder and co-CEO, he ran Arthur Anderson as the chief restructuring officer.
Mm.
So he got to see behind the scenes how a big four firm operates.
Got it.
He saw how lucrative the transaction services business is, but more importantly to him, he knew M&A and private equity was countercyclical to restructuring.
So did you know Brian Marsal
Not personally, but I knew who he was and I knew the firm. And a lot of people didn't know the firm then.
Right. But he was, you said he ran the practice over at Anderson, did you say?
When Anderson got distressed.
Okay,
Brian Marsal came in as the chief restructuring officer and liquidated Arthur Anderson.
Got it. Okay.
So what I know about Brian Marsal, I remember they were wheeling out the vending machines because we were going under. And I'm like, okay, well, I guess I should get my resume together at this point.
Yeah.
But I knew the firm.
Okay.
Yeah. So Brian was running it. I was long gone. Like after everybody left, you had a liquidated creditors settlement.
So he was doing the both at Enron and at.
No, we didn't do Enron. I don't think we were involved in Enron.
So A&M didn't, but you did. Alvarez and Marsal did the
Anderson
liquidation.
liquidate.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you hear Tony Alvarez and Brian Marsal tell the story, when they signed their engagement letter to do the Anderson liquidation, they negotiated out the no hire clause so that gave them the ability to hire Anderson people.
Wow.
Because they didn't know at the time, this was before they even started the engagement, but they said, hey, there's a lot of good people here that may need a home.
Right.
And maybe we could do it. So once Brian saw how the firm works from an insider perspective, he realized, hey, you know what? Number one, he viewed, very early on that these audit firms like you're seeing today are going to have challenges in their businesses, right? You see with EY with that Project Everest splitting the business up. So he said, here's an opportunity where I could take my boutique restructuring firm, potentially grow it into a global professional services firm that does everything a Big Four firm does, except audits. And if we keep the audits out, we could do a whole lot more, compete with MBBs and everybody else. Plus, the transaction services business, which is the crown jewel of any advisory firm, brings those private equity relationships, and that M&A model is counter-cyclical. We're so restructuring focused,
right?
That'll balance it out.
Yeah.
So luckily for me, they went to my old office managing partner from Anderson and said, who do you know, right? And luckily, he said, why don't you give this guy Aversano a call? He's a young partner at EY. I don't know what he's doing.
Yeah.
So I got a call, from A&M, and luckily I knew who A&M was. And because I had been through a change to EY, I was more open to potential opportunities.
Right.
And that's how A&M found me.
Back then it was a restructuring firm. It was known as a restructuring firm. Yeah. Did that give you any pause? Because I think, well, maybe not today, but back then it was like, you don't do restructuring. I don't do turnarounds. I don't do.
Right. I don't do any of that. I'm not involved in that side of the business at all. Right. I was brought on to co-lead. I co-founded the other side of the business, right? With my partner, Nick Alvarez, who's had a restructuring background. He's a PE operator and runs our PE operations group. And another partner, Jack McCarthy, who actually came out of private equity and now runs our A&M Capital Partners private equity arm. So it was interesting. I was concerned because in those days, 2005, nobody was doing that, like going from an accounting firm to a restructuring firm.
Right.
Particularly in 2005, 2006, that was like an M&A boom time.
Yeah.
Right. Back in the market then. So my partners thought I was crazy when I resigned from EY to go to A&M.
Yeah.
Like, you go to a restructuring firm? And I'm like, guys, the M&A market's cyclical.
Right.
What better place to be than the world's largest restructuring firm? Now, little did I know, I look like a genius. 2 years later, the financial crisis, Lehman Brothers, which was EY's largest client that they lost, audit client, and it became the largest bankruptcy that we did, A&M, in history.
Did you work on that?
No, it's restructuring. I wasn't involved. But
the other side.
What happened is it threw a lot of liquidity into the firm, given how big it was. And what I was doing is I was using that liquidity with my partners to build the M&A other side of it.
So here's, I'm going to pull out a lesson from your life there. You went from a Big Four, Big Five accounting firm,
to a boutique restructuring firm.
A boutique restructuring firm, and you knew nothing about restructuring and distress. You never weren't on that. You took a risk, right, in your career.
Yeah.
So what was that about? Obviously we could say, put it as lesson number 3, take risks. So what does that mean? Or take a risk in your career? It sounds like you took a risk in your career, but talk about
it. Was a risk back then. I had a wife, I had a 3-year-old daughter, and my wife was 9 months pregnant with my second daughter. So, leaving the comfort of a large firm with a little nest that you're comfortable with to go do something different. But I would say the lesson there, and I tell this to people, is, be objective and be open-minded when opportunities potentially present themselves. You can't control when these opportunities come, but you can be smart enough to at least hear them out. Right. It's funny. I do a lot of recruiting for A&M, the businesses that I'm building, and I'll call partners, my vintage and other firms, and I don't know them very well. I say, hey, I'd like to introduce me. I can buy you a cup of coffee. First thing they say is, I'm not interested, Paul. And I'm like, well, first of all, I'm not even giving you an offer. I don't know what you're talking about. I just want to have a cup of coffee. Right. But my view, when I hear those people shut it down, you might not be like, I wasn't interested in A&M.
Yeah.
I wasn't. I was happy at EY. I was doing my thing, but I was smart enough to listen to the opportunity and then take a step back
Yeah.
and, almost advise yourself as if you're advising a client, right?
Yeah.
Don't look at it. And it's difficult to do when it's yourself,
Yeah.
right? It's hard not to be subjective, but if you take an objective view and look at the opportunities and advise yourself independently as if you're advising a client, that's how I actually got to the decision that this is something that is different, unique, and could work.
Yeah.
And now I'm 18 years into it, and it's not only
You can always
worked,
go
it's
back to E and
working.
Y,
Yeah.
right? You could have
Yeah.
always gone back to E and Y. So
Well, I like to think that. They
yeah,
told me that. I like to think that, but you never know,
you're
you
right.
know?
Right. Uh, so I guess the lesson is there. If opportunity knocks, open the door and just listen who's there, right? Not
Yeah, I
not
mean,
just
look
close
at
it out, right?
right. Look at my career, right? I started off in college as finance. Then I switched to accounting. Then I went into audit. Then I went into transaction services. Then I went to A&M. Like I would never, like I didn't even know this path existed.
Yeah.
But I'm constantly, evaluating and looking at it. And I think that's the lesson, just be open-minded, be objective, and then make an educated decision once you have all the facts, right? Then
Well,
you
listen,
kind of make
you're
sense.
you're
Or
entrepreneurial. I
or-
would think you're a little bit more in other people's mind who are taking a more conservative approach. You're, I would think, would look at the more positive aspects of the chart. The pros on one side, cons on the other, and you'd focus probably more on the pros. Part of that. Is it? Do you do that? Do you weigh the pros and cons? How do
I
you?
weighed pros and cons. And what's interesting is that I'm actually the opposite. I'm an accountant by trade. We're naturally a pretty conservative bunch.
Okay.
And I was actually very negative on the risk of leaving EY to go to A&M because of my personal situation, young family, and my wife was the one who said, "You're crazy. You need to do this." Now, besides wives always being right,
Yes.
but the reason why she got to that conclusion
Yeah.
much quicker than I did, because she wasn't emotional or objective about it. And I was like, "You don't understand. This may not work. We're doing something different in the market."
Right.
And she's like, "Yeah, but look at this opportunity. You got to give it a shot."
Yeah.
And my wife, I met her in Binghamton. She's a CPA also,
Yeah.
but we were fortunate enough. She was a stay-at-home mom. She's like, "Listen, you go do that. I'll figure out, I'll handle the house, and we're a team, and off we go." And that was one of the keys to success. So she got to the conclusion much earlier because she was objective. When I looked at it objectively, then I ultimately got to the same conclusion.
Yep.
Right.
So part of the lesson there is, talk to someone who is vested but doesn't have as much emotional attachment, right?
Exactly. My view of a career is I like to do what I think is best. Everyone's responsibility should be what's in the best interest of themselves and their family, right? That's ultimately what matters, not these other firms competing for you and stuff like that. And if you take a step back and look objectively, it might not be the easy answer. It might be the more difficult answer, but if that's in the best interest of you and your family and you're willing to grit it out and grind it out and do the work,
Yep.
then it's kind of self-evident, right? Like I'm a grinder. I'm gritty. I hustle. I'm definitely not the smartest person in the room, but I'm not going to be outworked like that. I pride myself on doing the things that most people won't do to get to places where most people can't get to.
Right.
And that to me, that grit, that positive attitude, that willingness to learn, if you're the smartest person in the room and you don't have that, it's wasted.
Yep.
You'll eat that person alive every day. So control what you can control and grind it out. And that's what I contributed to.
Yeah. No, these are certainly great lessons. I want to talk about people who perhaps would want to work at A&M, but tell us a little about what you do at Alvarez and Marsal. Who you cover, how many
Yep.
people work for you. All of
Yeah,
that.
sure. So I'll just start at a very high level so people understand A&M, right? A&M has roughly around 10,000 people in 82 offices around the world. Started in 1983 by our founders, Tony Alvarez and Brian Marsal. And in the last 41 years of growing the firm, we've never bought a business. It's all organic growth, hiring people, chasing client demand. We as a firm, we're privately held. We have no outside shareholders. We have no debt. We're never going to go public. We're prohibited. We are a privately held partnership, global partnership owned by the partners. So it's very nice. We don't have any type of regulated businesses that we're involved in. So we really just focus not on ourselves, but on serving clients. And it's great because it's very clean. It's very commercial. We just worry about the clients first and foremost.
Yep.
When you look at A&M today, we really have three or say four, big routes to market. Now we have a lot of different service lines and geographies, but the easiest way to understand the firm is we're the world's largest crisis management, turnaround, and restructuring firm. We're in, I think, 7 of the top 10 largest bankruptcies right now. We are by far the market leader in restructuring, and that's the legacy business, right? Then we have what I'll call performance improvement. Okay. Now that's a broad term, but we have teams of people that are operational, industry, and functional experts, operational consultants, but also real operators that came out of industry and now work with us. And we have teams of industry folks. We have teams that are focused on private equity. We have teams that are focused on corporates, digital transformation, everything involved with value creation, performance improvement, not distress, because those are the restructuring folks, but we have what we'll call value creation focused on private equity, corporates, and any industry, you can think of, right? That's where we're deep global. Then the third area is really where I spend my time. I'll just call it transactions, right? So when you dig into transactions, there's multi stools in there. So what I lead is the global transactions group. Okay. Now I co-founded that 18 years ago with Nick Alvarez and Jack McCarthy, as I mentioned. And today that group, what we do is buy side and sell side due diligence, financial and accounting due diligence, capital markets, accounting advisory. And then we have ancillary businesses in there, such as transaction analytics. I also lead our firm's ESG business in the United States. That group, okay, has roughly 1,200 people. I have partners and teams in over 40 offices around the world. It's a full service global transaction services business. We compete almost exclusively with the big four. We're a solid number 5 globally, but I would say in certain countries, we're actually bigger than the big four in certain countries. And that continues to grow tremendously. Then we have a transaction tax business. We have a full service global tax firm. So obviously not just the diligence, but structuring, we have that team. And then everything that's not finance, accounting, and tax, we have a dedicated operations team, whether it be a corporate transactions group for integration and separation, or a private equity operations group that does everything from IT, HR, supply chain, all of that. So you look at A&M, there's restructuring, performance improvement / value creation, transactions. And we actually are building some ancillary business. We're building an infrastructure and capital projects business, which is very interesting. It's a bunch of engineers working on big construction projects and advising on those around the world. So we have that route to market as well. And, we're always looking at starting new businesses. In Europe, we're looking at starting a law business because, advisory firms can do that. So we're looking at those type of things. We're looking for things that, from a transactional perspective, which is what we're talking about, the entire investment life cycle from start to finish. We're building a corporate finance business. We have a valuations practice, whatever we can fully integrate in, commercial due diligence, operational due diligence. We really do almost everything now in various degrees and various scale around the world.
Audit, right? Because then, except I know, because if you were audit, then you couldn't get into many of these other businesses, right?
Exactly.
And that's what Brian, saw, right?
Correct.
Which was
Correct.
Audit is what actually prevents you from going in all these other businesses.
He saw it 20 years ago, and now it's coming to fruition. But we have been building our advisory business outside of restructuring for the last 18 to 20 years, and it's nothing but accelerated. I mean, globally. Because if you look at what's happening in the market today, pure play advisory businesses, mid-tier accounting firms being bought out by private equity, all the market is in a state of transition. And we already have a full service global platform, so a lot of people are calling and saying, hey, we want to make a move out of this, regulatory environment, get away from Sarbanes-Oxley and stuff like that. And we want to come work with you. And the reason why, from an M&A perspective, our model that we started in 2005, 2006 was really different at that time. We created what we called Big Four quality financial accounting and tax, just as good as the Big Four, I would argue better. But the secret sauce and why clients use us is they want access to the operational, industry, and functional expertise across all of A&M, right?
Yeah.
We integrate that with the accounting and tax,
Hmm.
pre and post acquisition, in an environment that's free of audit-based conflicts.
Yeah.
And that
That's
model
pretty
is
fascinating. Are other firms doing this? What do you think?
we started that by far in 2005, 2006. I think it's difficult. If you have an audit practice, that kind of
Right.
rules you out, right?
Yes.
If you're a public company, you got different challenges. If you're sponsor backed, you got different challenges. So I think firms are trying to emulate it to varying degrees. But, one of the key things that I think is a barrier to entry, when you look at tax, which is critical, right? We have a full service global tax firm. We have Arthur Anderson's old tax firm
Yep.
reassembled under the A&M umbrella.
Yep.
Where are you going to get a full service global tax firm?
Yep.
Every country, international, federal, state, and local transfer pricing, comp and benefits, M&A, we have it all.
Yeah.
That's a real game changer, whether you're working on corporate or private equity transactions, because you need that. So if you're trying to build these businesses without that, that's very difficult. But, we don't really worry about other people. We play our own game. The market demand is there. We've worked on, last year, thousands of transactions with hundreds of financial sponsors. Not all of those closed, but we track how many. So, we're a player in the game. And I think, when you look, 3 to 5 years out, we're going to we'll never, for a long time, we're not nearly the size of a big four, but we're starting to capture those MBBs, size wise. Again, not that that's an objective, but that's the level of growth in our firm has been, the firm has had a 20% CAGR over the last 15 years. My practice has had a 32% CAGR over the last 18 years in transactions. And to do that, including COVID, that's, it shows you that we're onto something. And not only the financial results, but we have some of the highest retention in the industry, which is how I judge it, So, I think we're onto something. We're always, being different, and we got a great team.
Yeah. When you say MEBs, for those of the uninitiated, it's
McKinsey, Bain, BCG.
Right.
Yeah.
BCG, the top three, the big three consulting firms, right?
Yeah. We compete with them. We compete with Accenture. We compete with Deloitte Consult. We compete with everybody. Every division of A&M has its natural competitors.
Yeah.
But when you look at A&M as a total firm, there is no competitor, because what firm has the world's largest restructuring firm and then a market leading transaction services and tax business, right? Combined. That's where I think we're really different. And then being independent, and then all the deep operational industry and functional experts, that's the key. That's what people really like about A&M.
Yeah. Yeah. Is that the secret sauce?
Secret sauce.
Yeah. But your people too, right? And
well, that's what I mean. It's the people. So we do client satisfaction surveys every year. And I have an independent group of senior advisors that go and meet with clients without us. The number one reason why clients use us, at least on transactions, is they want access to that deep operational industry and functional expertise. Like we have, probably several thousand of our partners and employees have operational backgrounds. Some of them are traditional operational consultants. We hire from all those MBB type firms, so that's fine. But we make a point of hiring real operators, former CEOs, CFOs, people like that. That's the game changer. So I'll give you an example. Like our healthcare business is very strong. We did the restructuring many years ago of Health South. So we had a lot of operational and industry expertise. So we started a healthcare industry group. In that group, we actually have doctors, dentists, and nurses. So I had a private equity client that was doing a roll-up of teeth whitening clinics.
Yeah.
And I brought a dentist onto the deal team. Yeah. Like a real dentist. And, these are the things that most of our competitors don't have.
Right.
We're sitting there with the client and he's like, listen, when I was running my practice, this is what we do. And the client's like, where did you get this?
You could, if you were rolling up barbershops, you could just go to your barber who, we had a
right.
And just,
we used to have, so I used to lead our firm's restaurant industry deal team. And we used to have, he's retired now, but we had the former CFO of TGI Fridays.
Yeah.
So when I'm doing a restaurant chain, whether it's QSR or casual dining, and I bring the former CFO of TGI Fridays onto the deal team, I mean, that's pretty powerful.
Yeah.
We used to have he's also retired, the former CEO of Brooks Brothers.
Mm-hmm.
So you're doing a retail and a power group and you bring in Bill Roberti. I mean, that's game changer, you
Right.
know? And that's the difference. So we're not just consultants, but we're hands-on operators.
Yeah.
And we try to bring that and permeate it pre and post acquisition into the transactions, whether it be corporate or private equity.
Yeah. So talk about your hiring practices. Who do you like to hire? If some of our young people, listening to the podcast, want to work at A&M, what qualities should they have and the best approach for them?
Well, it depends. Obviously we have a bunch of different business units that all have their own individual hiring criteria. So I could talk more broadly just about mine, but I think when you look, and it also depends, partners and staff, but I interview all the partners in my division anywhere we want to hire globally. I did one this morning. And what I look for, or if you said differently, the partners, and this can go for the staff as well, the people that are successful at A&M typically share three common attributes. Okay. They think and act like an owner. Okay. We want people who think and act like an owner. The partners will have real equity ownership in the firm. So they are actually owners.
Yeah.
The staff have the opportunity to be partners, but we want people to think and act like owners, own the problem, own the solution. Okay. We don't run these really large client service teams. They're much smaller. So you have to we're much more effective and efficient, but you're empowered to make decisions. So you have to think and act like an owner. We tell people when it comes to like private equity, act as if it's your own money. How would you approach this, right? Think very differently. So number one, think and act like an owner. Number two, we want people who have an entrepreneurial spirit, that fire in the belly, right? Go back to my example. I didn't realize at the time, but when I was younger, doing whatever it takes to be successful, right? Nothing is below me or the team. If I have to photocopy today, I'll do it. It doesn't matter to me. I like the flatter hierarchical structure where we're much more of a team than a traditional command and control environment.
Yep.
So, but that,
if you see someone on their resume that they owned a landscaping business,
I love that.
Yeah, right.
No, you know what I like? So when I look at resumes, the number one criteria I really like is military experience.
Yeah.
I'm a big believer in, applying military lessons to business. I've taken our team training up at West Point Military Academy, leadership training. So I like that. The other thing I actually like college athletes. I think that's, what D1, D2, D3, but if you have good grades and all that while being a full-time athlete, I think that shows a lot of leadership and managing skills. And so those are it's not just about grades. I'd rather have someone who's got, instead of a 4.0 as a 3.4, but has all this other stuff that's much more well-rounded, right? Because like I said, what we're doing at A&M, it's not easy. We're street fighting for clients. We're street fighting to hire the best people. So you want someone who's got that fire in the belly to be entrepreneurial, right? And the third thing that I like when people, the three attributes, I like people who have an appropriate level of self-confidence in their own abilities to be successful. Mm-hmm. They're not like birds in the nest, like waiting to be fed. They're out there making things happen, right? I joke around my team a little bit. I said, listen, deals don't happen in the office. Deals don't happen at home. You got to put yourself out there in the market, in traffic to make stuff happen, right? So I want people to have the appropriate level of self-confidence to be out there in the market to make things happen, right? So when I look at people, obviously I want people that share our culture and values. I want people that are going to be accretive to the practice and the firm. But the people that we hire are successful, think and act like an owner, entrepreneurial spirit, appropriate level of self-confidence. Not overconfident. If they're overconfident, we have a sort of unofficial no asshole rule. We don't hire people we don't like.
Right.
But appropriate level of self-confidence, I think, is what we like to see. So those are the attributes that we typically look for.
And you're also hiring, you're bringing on partners from other organizations.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
We promote, it's interesting. We have almost, I like, at least in the transactions world where I sit, we have about a 50-50 ratio of the number of people we promote internally at the partner level and bring from the outside. It's roughly half, which is really nice because obviously your first responsibility is to your existing team and to get them promoted. And that's good quality promotes. It's less risk. It's less of an economic cost, right? Because you don't have to entice people coming. But it's also a slower path to growth, right? Because they're not bringing new relationships and things like that. But then when you hire from the outside, more expensive, more risk, but they bring in new relationships, put
And
you in.
most of these people, late 30s, early 40s, is that around there or?
We don't really, honestly, I'll be honest with you, I don't look at the age. I look at, what they've done and,
But given
when I,
its career trajectory, they usually have
partners,
15 to 20
mid,
years. Yeah,
I mean, the partners probably are 12 to 15 years experience,
yeah.
you know? And then, the varying staff depending on where they do it. But it's,
I'm asking this because most of our
yeah,
listeners are those emerging leaders that do have
yeah,
15 to 20
yeah.
years of
Those would be,
experience and
we call it, we're structured as an LLC, not an LLP. So
yep,
we don't use the term partner. We're technically managing member.
members.
Like I'm the members,
Right.
but we use managing director, but every managing director at A&M is an equity partner.
Okay.
So
Right.
managing
So,
directors at AM are equity
so,
partners.
so, person listening, wants to make a career change, perhaps A&M, what do they do?
Listen, first of all, it's very easy to find me on social media, as you know. I mean, I think the firm has a pretty robust job site, right, where things are listed. But if not, or if you're not sure, I get a lot of just incoming,
Really?
whether it,
And you have a team or you're answering it? What's
yeah, well, it's a lot of it tends to come in through direct messaging and LinkedIn.
yeah.
So what I end up doing is if I'll quarterback that and I'll get it to the right people
Okay.
internally. So there's multiple ways you can go in. You could go in through the job sites, through our website and the firm. It's pretty robust. You could probably find some of the recruiters on LinkedIn because there are recruiters we handle it all internally. Or, people that just come into me or someone else they know, Nick Alvarez or others. We're very good at quarterbacking amongst the business units. That's what's good about a firm like ours. We're not big enough. There's a small group of leaders. We work very well together. We sit next to each other. We're all, so it's easy and we pass, information and CVs around pretty easily.
Yep. Yep. It sounds like hiring good people is a priority for your firm.
We have two priorities, especially me as a leader. It's client service and people, right? If you think about it, professional services, that's what it's all about. That's
Right.
where I try to spend 90% of my time. I have a chief operating officer, a chief of staff. They handle a lot of the operational side internally of running the business. And I try to spend my time with people and with clients. That's what it's about, right?
So you still do deals then? You're
No, I didn't say I execute.
okay. All right. So you've graduated, if you will, into more of running the firm, more of the administrative operational role than
So what I do is I spend a little bit more than probably 50% of my time covering clients.
okay.
So a lot of our large private equity clients, because my background is serving PE, I still cover, but I have a team of younger partners and people below me. So I manage these accounts, probably about 20 of them that I cover globally. My job is to bring all of the firm, I'm their one point or window to the firm. So, if you're a big, $15 billion fund, you can call anyone you want at A&M. It doesn't matter to me. But if you want one point of global contact, that would be me for a handful of accounts, right? And I make sure we're covering them properly. So that's where I spend, I'm never going to give up client relationships. Unfortunately, as much as I like doing the execution, I had to give that up. And we
Right.
got plenty of talented people that can execute and handle clients. So I'm out there in the market with existing major accounts and working to win other accounts. The other 30 to 40% of my time is executing our growth plan, and that's around people and teams of people. So, for example, 3 years ago, I hired 8 partners and 32 staff from EY in Shanghai
Yep.
and, recruiting them, negotiating those deals. I'm working on opening up A&M in Japan currently. I'm actually headed to China next week for
Mm.
something else I'm working on. So, starting service lines and geographic expansion all around people is where I spend the other significant component of my time.
Yep. Yep. Well, I'm honored that you have the time to be on this podcast with us. And with two things as we wrap up, where do you think the industry is headed? Give it 3 to 5 years, the future of deal making, more specifically, our audience is M&A. Um, the just in the past, I guess 10, 15 years alone, the emergence, if you will, of private debt, right?
Mhm.
Of those funds. Are those your clients too? There's some
Yeah. Yeah.
private debt
Mhm.
funds. So, even, outraised private equity, in many respects. Talk about where you see the trajectory of the M&A business going.
I think, when you ask a question like that, you got to kind of bifurcate it between the financial buyers and the strategic buyers, right? On the financial buyer side, I mean, that market, as you know, has a tremendous amount of capital that's been raised that needs to be deployed. So I think we have multiple years ahead, probably starting in 2025 after the election, where you're going to see,
Did people slow down what they're doing now? Do you feel that? Yep.
we're actually seeing an uptick now.
Yeah.
But it's not going to be back to more historical levels, I think, until you get through. There's too many things from a volatility perspective. The market, the M&A market, from my history, I've been for over 25 years like you, I've seen multiple cycles. Election years are always choppy. And, obviously in the US, we have two very divergent candidates. So until folks know what fiscal and monetary policy, tax policy is going to be, they're always a little hesitant, right? But then you also have a lot of geopolitical risks between, Russia, Ukraine, what's going on in Gaza, North Korea, Iran. You got a lot of geopolitical risk, which is uncertainty. So, you got inflation, right? You got interest rates. There's a lot of variables right now. I call it the vortex of volatility
Right.
that are, the market doesn't care if it's good or bad. They just need certainty so that they can make decisions on how to operate.
Yeah.
And we don't have that right now. It's slowly starting to return. And there's so much pressure in the financial buyers that they have to transact. So we are seeing an uptick. I think we have one of the largest sell side due diligences in the United States. So when I see that business pick up, it's usually like a 3-month lead till you start seeing the buy, right? So we're starting to see that, but I think it's not going to really go until 2025, probably right after the holidays, January. Everybody will come back. We'll be through the election. Okay, we got to go. And I think that's the general consensus. On the strategic side, it ebbs and flows, right? I mean, it depends on, do you need to get in or out of a particular industry or geography, your competitive position? I think what you're seeing a lot cut through everything is technology, right? Are you on the winning or losing side of technology, and you're going to act accordingly from an M&A perspective. So there's a lot of variables happening, but overall, if I had to summarize, I would say I'm bullish of the overall trends, probably starting in 25 on both strategic and private equity M&A. I think you're going to see a lot
And
of
both U.S. and global.
U.S. and global.
Okay.
Yeah. I've been to Japan 3 times in the last 9 months. I'm very bullish on that market. One of the things I look at that a lot of people don't, when you look at, I look at currency fluctuations, right? Because that drives investment dollars. If you see, there's a lot of the global PE funds are now opening up in Japan because the yen is at like a 30+ year low versus the dollar. So from a valuations perspective, everything's on sale, right? So a lot of US denominated funds, global funds, are coming into that market, right? So I look at currency movements to try to manage, where I see global M&A. China is slowing down. If you read what you read, I've been to China. Like I said, I'm going next week, because of US rules, China rules, nationalism. But we're hedging our bets. A lot of that business out of China is now going into Southeast Asia and into India. So we're growing our firm in India. We're growing our firm across Southeast Asia. We've opened up in Jakarta, Malaysia, Philippines, Vietnam. So, you got to kind of, it's like that analogy in hockey, not where the puck is, but where you think it's going.
Right.
Right. And as someone who's helping build the practice in the firm, I'm always trying to figure out, and how do I do that? Well, obviously I read a lot of data and stuff, and I have access to our own proprietary data from the clients and the deals, but I talk to people, talking to clients, that goes back to my earlier point. You got to be out there, right? I can't just sit in my home office and work from home. Nothing's going to happen here, right? Other than the dog. That's it. So you gotta get out there.
How many days are you on the road, and how many,
It's tough to say.
Yeah.
I travel
What's
a
your
lot of,
percentage?
yeah,
Sounds like you're going out
I
of the
would,
country,
I would say it's probably a third, travel, a third in the office, and a third home work from home. It's probably like roughly that.
That's a good.
I do what I have to do when I need to do it. Right.
Yeah.
That's, everyone's got to figure out what's best for them. My work-life balance is my work and my life are completely intermingled, but
Yeah.
I do personal stuff with my kids when I need to do that. And I do work stuff when I need to do that. And I seem to make it all work.
Yeah. And your wife's happy. She made the decision to have you work at A&M.
I think so.
Sure.
She hasn't had to go back to work. She's been out of work. She's been
Okay.
stay at home for 20 years. So I think she's pretty
You,
happy.
you might have to, check, bring those survey people to ask your family how things are going.
Yeah. I
It's
think they're
like,
pretty happy. I got kids in college. They all drive pretty nice cars and,
okay.
we got a beach. I think they're doing okay.
It's a little,
Listen, I always tell, it's the price you pay for the life you want to lead,
right.
right? It's up to you, right?
Yeah.
And everyone's got to figure out what works best for them.
Yeah.
I'm driven by the opportunity, right? I'm excited when I see opportunity. It's not someone telling me to go do this. It's you see it in the market. And when you see those opportunities to compete and to win, because I'm naturally very competitive, that's what motivates me. I'm really motivated by our people. A lot of people, they join A&M. I help recruit them. And it's almost like when I see them be successful, it's almost like, hey, I told you so, right? Like sometimes I'm more bullish. I tell people like, I think you're going to be more successful at A&M than you even think. Like, but to see, I feel a personal responsibility.
They're like your kids, right? You're
Yeah.
trying to,
I mean, given I
wow.
was employee number one, with two co-founders, right? So the three of us starting a business and, 18 years later, 1,200 direct reports and others, like I feel personally responsible for the well-being, livelihood, and success of these people, right? There's a personal, and I can only imagine what our founders must feel, right? They must feel that for the whole 10,000 person organization, which is, it's incredible.
Yeah. Well, listen, I mean, it's obvious, why you're receiving this leadership award from the M&A Advisor in September 23rd, 24th.
Yep.
You'll also be speaking there, and we'll be also recognizing you on November 19th and 20th with your induction into the Hall of Fame. So congratulations on that. How do you feel?
I'll tell you, I'm a long way from Binghamton. I'm a long way from mowing lawns. No,
Yeah.
I feel, listen, first of all, I feel very humbled. You know, I've had people tell me, you never stop and smell the roses. Like I'm just always going to the next thing.
Yeah.
And I always worry about the downside risk, and we don't do a good enough job at celebrating the wins and the successes. So I feel humbled. I feel appreciative. And, when you talk about those events that are upcoming, I've actually invited a fairly large contingent of people from my firm.
Yeah.
Because while I'm the one technically getting the award, it's really not about me. It's about us. Like it's all these people I've surrounded myself with that have made us successful. And I want it to be about us. So, and what's cool is that a lot of, they're all coming, which is great.
No,
So,
that's incredible. And what I tell people who, sometimes we either, uh, acknowledge people, recognize people in leadership or lifetime, and you know, most people are very humble. They don't think they deserve it.
yeah,
But I tell them, look, it's not really for you.
right.
It's for people to be inspired by you and what you've done. It's the people that deserve it the most are the most humble, which you are. You're
I think we have about 50 people,
wow.
not from A&M and clients that I've invited because, longstanding clients, because
Yep.
this is the group
Right.
that's driven the success.
Right.
I'm just,
Right.
the recipient, right? So, and they're coming, which is, I'm very excited about,
Well, I mean, it's hard, people's schedules are tough, so I'm glad you're able to do
and
that.
my wife will be there. So you can actually ask her those questions
Okay.
directly.
Well, I'll answer those questions, but you should get those independent survey folks to
Yes.
to come in and interview your family. Make sure
Right.
you're doing it. Is there anything we have? This is such a wonderful conversation. Giving of your time. Is there anything that you that I didn't cover that you want to mention
No,
or anything?
no. I mean, listen, again, I'm very appreciative. I'm humbled. It's a great opportunity for, me here, with the M&A Advisor, but really for our firm and for our people. And, I'm happy. I like the fact that this is, you know, happening along with the emerging leaders, because that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not about me anymore. I'm about everybody else around me. And the one thing I'll say, the number one thing I've learned over my entire career, which we didn't talk about, is it is all about relationships.
Mhm.
the power of relationships. That is the most important thing. Friends want to do business with friends. People want to do business with who they trust. And it's all about relationships. We have a whole program where we train our people at A&M. We call it RDTA. We want you to be relationship-driven, trusted advisors. That's what it's about. And, at events like this and with the M&A Advisor, it's just an opportunity to meet more people from diverse backgrounds and develop more relationships, and helping people. That's what I'm about, the power of relationships. That's what I learned early on.
Yep. Paul, this was a wonderful conversation. We'll, look forward to seeing you in September. A
Yep.
well-deserved recognition, September 2020, 23rd, 24th in New York, for the Leadership in Leadership Award, and then recognized and inducted into the Hall of Fame on November 19th and 20th. So congratulations, Paul. Thank you for joining us.
I'm even getting my tuxedo let out.
Oh yeah, no, you gotta have, let out. So you've been living
Let
a
out.
good life.
I had to summon my tailor with all his powers to fix that tux, baby.
Okay. All right. Well, my wife actually doesn't, when she comes to these, she says, I got to lose, I got to go to the gym, and yoga for I got a few weeks to do that. She doesn't let it out. So I tell her just,
I just went right to, I shortcut the whole thing. Efficiency, just like at A&M. Performance improvement in the tuxedo and the tailor.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Paul, thank you very much.
Thank you, Roger.
We hope you enjoyed this episode and learned something new from it. If you have any questions or comments for us or any of our guests, please feel free to leave them in the podcast platform of your choice or send us an email at editor@maadvisor.com. We would love to hear from you and get your feedback.